I think that a lot of times in divorce, one of the things that we're asking for, and you've kind of covered some of them, is we're asking for bank loan applications because people will always kind of inflate the value of their business in those. And then have you defrauded the bank? Have you defrauded, like, and again, so she's kind of caveat. It's like, well, I wasn't a valuation expert, but we also ask for prior transactions. So any offer to buy, any offer to sell, and so I think it's interesting because now it makes sense a little bit to me of like the husband was probably trying to rely on that botched transaction as an indicator of value. But a lot of times we're looking at several indicators of value, and it doesn't quite mean that that is what expert testimony comes in because, again, and this might be a little nuance of it, is a deal, like especially a transaction in the company could have been strategic value as opposed to fair market value, so you could even argue and you would need, like, that's where you would probably still need an expert to come in and testify. They could have introduced that evidence of like a prior transaction that came through and what the implication to value was. But the husband probably was just like, okay, let's just introduce the evidence and maybe it'll stick. Like maybe the judge will consider it as part of the situation. So that seems a little flimsy in the evidence land, maybe.
Well, one other interesting piece is the husband testified. We have two cases today where the husband testifies to the business value. In this case, the husband does not run the business. He handles the personal finances. So he was handling the line of credit and their personal side of their finances, but not the business itself. And he testified that he used EBITDA. But then when cross-examined, he couldn't show how he used it. He couldn't show how it contributed to his number. And her expert, the wife's expert, actually used the profit margin. He showed that their profit margins had declined over the previous 4 years, that the loss of the big bank was also a downward pressure on valuation. And his three methods, the wife's expert, 45 years experience, 25 business valuations a year, a single period capitalization, he came out with 6.25 million. His ultimate valuation is 8.8, but that first method, 6.2. Then the second is a market-based EBITDA, which as a lay person testifying, you never want to go up against an expert where you're claiming a valuation method and then you can't explain the math. And then the other side actually explains the math and their math is against what you concluded. So the court ultimately concluded at the trial level on appeal that the husband's financial testimony was not credible. So he basically is not believed about anything. You can understand why. The second one, though, was the market-based EBITDA, and that was 10.4 million. And then the third was marketplace. I'm trying to look at my notes. The multiplier at 10 million. And then her expert came out to 8.8 million. The court, using all the evidence in the record, values the business at 10 million. Yeah. That's not going to get reversed on appeal because there was competing evidence in the record. The court gets to make a discretionary credibility determination, and that is never going to be an abuse of discretion. That's the standard on appeal, that the appellate court won't step in when there is evidence the credibility of evidence is being weighed, because the trial judge saw the testimony, saw the person on the stand giving the testimony, and the appellate court doesn't. That's how the wife ends up with a 10 million valuation, even though 6 months earlier she agreed technically to a 19.5 million valuation to support the lines of credit. But that it worked out fine for the wife in this instance. I'm sure it wasn't fun, that part of the cross-examination, but that's not something to walk into. That is something to really try to avoid. Conflicting valuations within 12 to 6 months of your divorce trial. 6 months is not that remote.
Well, and I think you bring up a couple good points. One is, the difference between an expert witness and a fact witness. And a lot of times the parties are fact witnesses. So they can come in and testify like these things happened. Like we filed this with the bank and it had this number on it. Like those are facts, right? There's not opinions about it. We had this offer that didn't go through. Those are facts. At the point that you actually have an opinion about the value,